happy Independence Day. I know it's technically tomorrow, unless you're watching this tomorrow, then happy Independence Day. So this is class 2 for the Liftoff technical lecture series. We're going to be covering a variety of things. Particularly, we'll focus a lot on Agile, which is super relevant because this is really the flow, the workflow that we're going to be living in for the duration of these projects that we're building. So thanks for joining. Let's get started. All right, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and roll into Standup. Good to see everybody here. Right, so for myself, I set up the project like Agile board where we'll be tracking everything. Chose to go with GitHub's internal project tracking. I thought it'd be nice to have everything in the same spot, so I can show it to y'all later. Just give a tour of where we'll be tracking our stories and whatnot. And so today I'm going to just be trying to write some more user stories for the project. For blockers, the only blocker I have necessity with writing user stories is that I really just need to sync up with y'all on what we're doing with the project, and so we can get at least some starter stories written out so we can get to work. Yeah, cool. So what I did yesterday, I did the whole readme update, which reminds me it does have a summary of the MVP stuff. So if we want to talk about user stories later, that'd be a really great jumping off point. Maybe write some stories to those. We can discuss that. That'd be good. What I'm working on today is I am creating a UI. It's a UI story for making the view for just a homepage. It's gonna be something really basic, just to have something out there. It'll be our first page for the website, which will be cool. As far as blockers, I don't have any blockers. Just really excited to be on this team. And yeah, I guess that's it for me. So, your turn.
Alrighty, so since we last met, I completed the Spring initializer setup for the code base, and so it looked pretty good. Which reminds me, I still need to open up a merge request for it, but it's done. It just needs to be. I just need to open up a pull request. So I'll do that after Standup. What I'm working on right now is just doing some research on Spring security. I was considering just implementing it like what we learned in class as far as like the user authentication, but I wanted to take a day and do some research on a couple other options, and Spring security kind of caught my attention. Right now, I don't have any blockers, and so that's it. Cool. Go team.
So I'm working on the Time Traveler Boutique project, and we can see here that I have a branch called initial Java code. It already exists on GitHub. And then if I look at my project, currently on that branch in here, if we look inside of our Git bash terminal, it will tell us what branch we're on. And so I've actually made quite a few changes because this is a brand new project, and before now we didn't have anything. And so I used the Spring initializer and generated all of this code. And so what I need to do now is set this code up to be a pull request. So first I need to make sure I have all of my changes pushed up from my local machine, my laptop, up to the remote, which is GitHub. So basically getting it from living on my laptop to also living in the cloud. So I'll start by running git status, and I can see here that I have a file that I've changed since the last time I've committed or saved changes. So I'll stage this by doing git add all. If I run git status again, we can see that it is staged, it's green, it's ready to be committed. It hasn't been committed yet, it hasn't been saved, it's just been selected to be saved. So from here I can say git commit. I'll add -m as a flag to add a message, and I'll write added build.gradle changes. And different teams care more or less about how informative your commit messages are. The workflows that I'm most familiar with don't emphasize like really thought out commit messages a whole lot. Usually where a lot of the communication happens about what code changes we are doing, that usually happens in the pull request, which we'll see here in a moment. So now I've saved all my changes. If I run git status, I don't see any changes. But I do have this message here that it says that my branch, it's ahead of essentially what's up on GitHub by one commit. And so these changes that I just made, they don't exist on GitHub. So we need to run git push. And now it goes from my local physical laptop up to the cloud. All right, so let's switch over to GitHub. So now it detected the fact that I just pushed changes very, very quickly, because we have this little thing here that says compare and pull request. So if I want to create a new pull request, which would make sense, I can go ahead and click on this button, which we can do that. Alternatively, I wanted to show that if we go to the branches, I just clicked on the thing that said branches, I can just look at the name of the branch and click on new pull request here. Let's go back to the home page. Branches sent me to all the branches. I can also say view all branches here, but instead I'm going to click on compare and pull request. And so here is really my chance to communicate what these changes are. So I'm going to try to be descriptive. I'll say use the Spring initializer to generate the starter Java code for this project. If I want to be more descriptive, it's a great idea to add testing steps. So I'll say build and run locally. Should start up, but not show a page. Okay, so I'll go ahead and now that I have my message describing what we're doing, create pull request. The Spring initializer added a lot of changes. These are all my commit messages down here. The way this project is set up is it requires an approval from someone to be able to go ahead and add this code from the initial Java code branch to our main branch. All right, so that's it. So I've created my pull request. Now I'm just going to wait on my colleagues. I'll probably give them an update that I made the pull request, but I'm going to wait on my colleagues to review these changes that have been made.
All right, let's take a look here. So I got notified by another developer on the team that they created the initial Java code, and I need to just go ahead and take a look at their pull request, review it, potentially approve it so we can get this added to our main code base. So just to point a few things out here, one, I am using the Edge browser. I much prefer to be using Internet Explorer, except that they replace Internet Explorer with this Chrome with a different color palette. You can sense my disappointment. Alright, so we'll notice we're on the main branch, and just this summary of files, there's only a README. However, if I jump over to the initial Java code branch, there's a lot of changes. There's not that cool picture in here. That's just part of the main branch. We have all these other files, these initial Java code files. And so if I want to review this branch, I'm going to rely on the other developer to open a pull request. And we can see up here in this tab, we have a pull request. And so I'm going to click on that. All right, I'm just looking at a summary of all the pull requests. I'm going to click on this and review. So there's two main things I want to do reviewing this pull request. I just want to visually inspect the files, just see if there's anything that jumps out at me. And then I want to run the code on my own machine and test it, see that it works. I just clicked on the Files Change tab. There are 10 files that have been changed.
This first file is a git ignore. This looks like this was probably generated by the Spring Initializer. I'm going to just mark this as viewed. Something I really want to review there. Now I'm looking at the build.gradle, and there's something that jumps out to me here. The Spring security dependencies. This is dead code. What do I mean by dead code? Dead code is code that's been commented out. It's not actively being used, and generally speaking, we don't want this in a project. It clutters things up. It's just generally recommended not to have. Remove dead code. All right, and I will add an emoji because I like emojis. You know, I want to be a little bit more thoughtful with my language, so I'm going to say consider removing. So it's a suggestion, not a command. I'll add that comment. All right. So I'm going to mark this file as viewed. There's nothing else interesting to me there. The same as this file. If we did have a database in the cloud and these were the password and username to it, that would be a huge concern. Would be stop everything, change the password remotely, you know, delete this commit, all that kind of good stuff. But we don't have to worry about that. It's still in development. This last file, pretty standard. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down the code, which I've already done, and build it and run it. And I just want to see that it works, and if there's any specific changes to test, I'll test them here. So I'm running the file. It's thinking about it. Yeah. All right, we're going. Let's open up my second favorite browser. Localhost. I love the ads. Just brighten my day. All right, I get a white label error page, but that's actually correct. This is good because we don't have a home page yet. We don't have anything mapped to this. We just have our initial Java code. So this is good. My concern about the dead code, you know, it's a legitimate concern, but it's not enough for me not to approve this. So I'm going to mark this as approved. So how did I get here? I am in Files Changed, this tab. So pull request, specific pull requests, Files Changed, and then while I'm in here, I have this Review Changes drop down, and I can select Approve. Submit Review. And this has been an approved MR. So now the initial developer can merge this into the main code base. All right, so I just got word that my pull request has been reviewed, and it's also been approved. So that's good news. I could spend some time looking at this, and for the sake of this video, I'm not going to worry about that right now. The main thing is that this has been approved, and our team only requires one approval. Some teams want 2 approvals per pull request, but I'm going to go ahead and merge this. Before I do, I really want to point out, if we look at the code base, our main branch, it only has this README with this cool image, cool in quotations. And then we also have our initial Java code branch. Now this is the pull request branch, and it's got all these extra files, but the README is not as updated as the main branch. And so let's watch what happens when we merge this pull request. All right, I'm back in the pull request. Sorry for jumping around so much. I'm at the bottom of it. I'm going to click on Merge Pull Request. Confirm merge. It's been successfully merged and closed. Now, as some housekeeping, I am going to delete the branch because I don't need this branch anymore. It's done its job. It's a feature branch. It has all the changes it needed to have. Those changes have been added to the main branch, and so I'm going to delete the branch. All right. So now, oops. Okay, it's not happy. You'll look in the URL that it's got the name of the old branch that I just deleted. There we go. Okay, so now we can see we're on the main branch. It's got all of these changes from that pull request, and it's got the changes it already had, the updated README. So this is good. This has been successful. We cleaned up the branches by deleting it after we merged it. There are no pull requests. We're good to go. All right, so we're setting off building our projects, and it's a huge task because we need to plan things, we need to coordinate, and then we're just in this complex software development space, right? And so what we need is a tried and true approach for managing these projects. And so as we discuss this, where we're going to end up at is we're going to end up at Agile. But to better understand Agile, it's helpful if we take a step back and first consider what came before Agile. So what came before Agile was the Waterfall methodology. And the Waterfall methodology sounds really logical and reasonable. It's very straightforward. So let's take a look at it. So here we can see we will first gather with the Waterfall methodology, we'll gather all of the requirements. We're going to figure out what are we building, get all of those ideas lined up. After that, we will design the application. And then once we have the requirements and we have the design, then we'll develop. After that, we'll test it, and then we'll deploy it. And deploying it is really reaching that done state where it's running up in the cloud or wherever it's going to live, and the application's available to users. And then finally, there'll be maybe maintenance tasks in the future, like applying security updates. And so that's the Waterfall methodology. What's wrong with this? What's problematic about approaching software in such a methodical, well-structured way? The biggest issue with the Waterfall methodology is in the software world and really in the modern world, things change quickly. If you are putting all of your planning up front and then you go into development, the amount of time that it takes to plan and develop the application, it's not unreasonable that some things will change along the way. But with Waterfall, there's not a lot of flexibility to adjust for changes to the plan because the plan is made all up front. So the rigidity of it, the inability to course correct, really doesn't work very well with software development. And so that's why Agile was born. And so what is going to draw us to Agile is the ability to be flexible, to change and to adjust and to adapt. Cool. So let's take a quick look over here at the Agile methodology. We'll notice it has a lot of the same phases to it as Waterfall does. We still have gathering requirements, designing, developing, testing, deploying. But then there's a review phase, and then the cycle continues. It's really just increasing the feedback loop. So let's say we start off with the majority of the requirements, not all of them. And then from there, we'll design a portion of the application. We'll develop this feature that's been designed. We'll test it. We'll deploy it. And so this is something you'll see in like CI/CD. This is a DevOps concept, but there's really cool pipelines that can be built that will continuously deploy your application as you add changes to it. But that's a bit out of scope for right now. But generally speaking, from there you'll deploy it and then you'll review it so the customer can see these changes and interact with them, and that's very good. And so from there, we'll continue this cycle of developing and then getting feedback, etc. And so it's really just that taking the Waterfall methodology and making it more flexible that makes Agile the preferred method. Agile has a lot of components to it. There's a simple minimalist version of Agile that I'm personally familiar with practicing in development teams. There are more maximalist approaches. You can make Agile, you can make it complex, I think. And so generally speaking, if Agile it's kind of ironic, but if Agile is fighting against you, if you feel like the process is not working for you, then the Agile thing to do would be to adjust your process, right? And so it's really a flexibility first sort of a mindset, But let's look a lot closer at Agile so we can really understand what are the steps, what's the flow and the rhythm to really make this process work. All right, so let's take a closer look at the Agile methodology. The Agile methodology actually has a manifesto, which is like the philosophy behind it. It's actually kind of interesting. It's worth reading. And we're not going to go through the manifesto right now. However, instead we're going to talk about the sometimes they're called ceremonies, but like the workflow, the process, what it's like participating in the Agile process. With Agile, we will break up work into sprints. And so a sprint could be something like a 2-week chunk of time, give or take. It can be adjusted, but let's just say it's a 2-week chunk of time. Now, in that rhythm, it will begin with a sprint planning meeting where we're planning on what work we're going to accomplish in these next 2 weeks. And then during that 2-week stretch, all the developers will be accomplishing tasks, accomplishing user stories, which we'll talk about. And then at the end, we will have a retrospective, and we'll talk about, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do differently next time? And then from there, that goes back into sprint planning. We plan the next 2 weeks, and then we work through that process. Each day doing a stand-up, or depending on how often we're meeting together, each time we meet together doing a stand-up, just talking about that rhythm. And so if you're a musician, you can sort of think of this as like a stand-up being like a beat, and then the sprint being a measure. So what should your sprint planning meeting look like? So at the beginning of each sprint, as a team, you'll meet together and determine what user stories or backlog items that you're going to work on during that sprint. For now, consider a user story as just a bite-sized task. And so once we determine all of the user stories that we're going to work on during the sprint, we'll need to prioritize them and then estimate the effort required to complete them. Let's say, for example, we have a user story that is adding a basic homepage. Well, there's different ways to estimate the effort required, but one way to do it is just have everyone throw out a number, 3, 2, 1, vote, and it's like 1 is roughly a day's worth of effort, 3 is roughly 3 days worth of effort, and you can just sort of, as a group, estimate how much effort is this going to take. This is not super important to get very accurate, but it's just part of getting an understanding of what type of work we have in front of us. And so let's consider what a user story is. So we've brought up user stories a couple different times. A user story is really, it's just how we are, it's like the smallest element of how we're breaking up our work. This is the specific task that we will be writing code to achieve. And so with user stories, instead of saying something like, your task is to build the homepage, it instead will be written from the perspective of a user. So it could be something like, as a user, when I visit the web page, the website, I'm able to access the homepage. Something simple like that. Or a different user story may be that as a user, when I press the log out button, I am automatically logged out, things like that. If you're wondering how many user stories you should have enough that you're going to have plenty of work for like the next 2 weeks or whatever sprint cycle you choose. Oh, hey there. Didn't see you there. For the final topic of this evening, we're going to discuss branching. So for me, learning branching, especially from the perspective of a collaborative team, was always a bit, I just found it a bit of a harder topic to understand. You may have the hang of it by this point, but let's go ahead and just review the concept. So we've probably seen graphics like these or things similar to it in the workbook and elsewhere, where we have our main branch, and then we have different feature branches like spawning off of it. And so here I have sort of an illustration of more of a visual illustration of what might be happening. So here, let's say our main branch already has some work done on it. We have a house, but the house has no windows and it's missing some landscaping. So we can go ahead and create a feature branch to add the windows, and then we'll write the code to add the windows. A different developer, not us, just someone else working on the project, a different developer may create a feature branch that corresponds with the user story to add landscaping. And so developer A has a branch that adds the windows. Developer B has the branch that adds the landscaping. Now, when we merge those branches back into the main branch, what we end up with is a combination of both developer A's changes, the windows, and developer B's changes, which is the landscaping. And so this is the general flow that we'll follow. Is going to work great for the majority of use cases. All right, starting from the Scrum board, Kanban board, whatever we want to call this. This is our project management board. I'm going to go ahead and pick up a user story. And the user story I'm going to pick up is this creating the home page user story. So I'll go ahead and assign myself as a user. I can view the home page at / at the root directory. Okay. And I'm going to move this over from to do to in progress since I'm going to be actively working on this. We can see that this is user story number 4. So let's jump over to the project, or the repository, I should say. And we don't have a branch yet. So I'm going to show you my favorite workflow for creating branches. Technically, we can create them locally and then connect them to our remote repository, but I like making them from the remote repository. So I'll start selected on the main branch. It's important that we start here. And then I'm going to name it using the story number. This is not necessary. Your team may have a naming convention for how you name your branches, or your team may not have that. And so I just follow whatever y'all agree upon, if you've even discussed it. So here I'll go 4 and I'll say add home page. So this is the name of our branch. Click that there. The branch has been created. All right, so this has all of the changes from the main branch. I just made a copy of it, and so from here I can add my own changes. Now this currently exists in the remote repository, and I can see I'm on the wrong branch right now. So I'm just going to go git checkout main, git pull. And I've pulled down a bunch of changes, but one of the things I pulled down is my new branch. So I'm going to go ahead and git checkout. I'll just say number 4, and then tab to autocomplete. And now I am on my new feature branch. I'll add changes to this branch locally, and then when I'm done, I'll go through the process of committing those changes and then end with git push. And when I do git push, it'll end up back at the home page. And then from there, I can open up a pull request and then go through that cycle. All right, we've reached the end of this lecture. So in summary, we've talked about Agile methodology versus Waterfall. We looked a little bit closer at Agile. We talked about user stories, sprint planning, retrospectives. We also looked at the mechanics of just the whole process of creating a pull request, which we'll have time to talk about in the near future as well. It's a huge part about being a developer in this modern age, in my opinion. So a few things I just wanted to highlight regarding Agile and Waterfall. Waterfall may seem intuitive. It may seem logical because you're doing everything up front, all the planning. However, it's error prone, and there's not enough room for it to be flexible, and there's not really opportunities for, if you're building something for a customer, for them to be able to provide feedback. With Agile, there's so much more opportunity for course correction. The code is typically higher quality because there's more iterations of reviewing and testing it. It's so much more predictable, actually, because we are planning in sprints, like a 2-week-ish, depending on the plan, like a 2-week chunk of time where we know specifically the user stories, the tasks that we intend to accomplish. This is as opposed to like just saying, generally speaking, hey, we're going to build the app. You have like this broader scope with the Waterfall. We're able to keep it manageable with with sprints, and then with user stories, and so forth. Finally, with user stories, really the important thing with them is that they're a bite-sized task, something that can be completed in 1 to typically like 1 to 4 days is about how large I think user stories should be. 4 is on the larger side. Sometimes they have to be more time consuming than that, but generally speaking, we want to keep them about that size. And so that's the important part, is that they're bite-sized tasks. The more agile flavor to user stories is just the fact that we're writing them in such a way that they tell a story. So as a user, I'm able to do X. As a project manager, I'm able to go to this page and click on this button and it does something. And then we as developers will write the code to see that through. So anyways, hopefully this has been educational, helpful. I know this is very different than the previous lectures and formats. I just felt like doing something a little bit unique for this particular lecture, so hopefully it's fine. Anyways, that's all I have for you. I'll see you next class later.